Hey there, Mike Dunn with Gaming Trend, and we're back with Tabletop Throwdown. It's been months. We've been to some conventions, we've played some games, we've done some stuff, and frankly, this comeback has been a long time coming. So if you're coming back, if you watched us before, thanks for coming back. If you've never seen us before, I hope you like it and continue to watch episodes as we go into the second half of our first season, into the next several weeks. But let's stop all that business and stop talking about that. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. We actually have a special guest tonight. His name is Christian Hoffer. If you read anything online about D&D or Pokemon, chances are you've read some of his work. Also, he's let's see, he was at comicbook.com. He's posted some work on Polygon along with a few other sites. I will let him get into the nitty gritty of that because he'll probably remember it a lot better than me. But we're going to talk about what he's been doing, what he's doing now. That's really exciting. And then we're going to, of course, talk a bit about some D&D. And that's why we have Steven Starkey with us tonight on the podcast. As if you're a longtime viewer, you'll remember Steven is our resident D&D historian. And he hates it when I say that, but I think he's starting to get used to it a little bit.
Yeah, it makes me read more.
Just own it, man. Just own it. You've got all the books. You can read it. So, yeah. But yeah, let's dig in and talk to Christian. Christian, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing okay. It's a Monday, late night. I think the kids are all asleep, and so just enjoying a quiet house at the moment.
Fantastic. Now, Christian, you and I met at GaryCon earlier this year, but I'd actually been reading your work on comicbook.com for a while before that. As a matter of fact, I would, for my opinion of what you've been doing online at comicbook.com and some of the other places you posted at, you're one of the more measured voices in the D&D sphere, talking about D&D, especially since the big OGL fiasco of last year. But we'll dig a little bit more into that. I've always been really curious, like, how did you start doing this, man?
So a long time ago, this was right after I got out of college. I've always wanted to be a writer, and in a more romantic life, I would become a book writer, a novelist, or something like that. But this was early 2010s, late 2000s, and instead I started writing about comics, I wrote a lot. I wasn't very good at first. You can't find most of that stuff online. That's probably a good thing. But one thing that I did attract the attention to was of a person named Tom Spurgeon. Now, Tom Spurgeon was better known as the comics reporter, and he was the definitive source for comics reporting. He was the one of two legitimate comics journalists in the space, the other being Heidi MacDonald. There's a few others, but Tom was like the giant in that field. And for whatever reason, Tom and I became friends, and Tom took me under his wing, and so I learned the trade of journalism, for lack of a better term. And it was kind of wait a little bit, because he was an old school journalist. He has a journalism degree. His father was a newspaperman, and I was an internet gremlin. And so it was kind of a weird blend of those two things, but I learned a lot from Tom, and I was like his last protege, so to speak, before he passed away. And now I don't write about comics at all. I used to run a comics blog, and I stopped doing that around the time that my first son was born. And shortly after Comic Book, which at the time was an independent operation, they contacted me and was like, hey, do you want to write listicles for us for like $15 a pop? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I would love money. I like money a lot. And so I was doing that for a hot minute, and the site's like managing director at the time, a person named Jim Viscardi, who came from comics. I knew him. He used to work for Marvel in marketing, and then he jumped over to the other side. Now he's back in comics writing. He's the business development officer for Image. But Jim was like, hey, you like Pokemon, right? Can you write a couple articles about Pokemon a day? Like 2-3 articles about Pokemon a day. And I was like, yeah, sure, I can write about Pokemon, whatever. And so I was doing that. And one of the things I wrote about was this upcoming mobile game called Pokemon Go. And, I was one of the only people to talk about Pokemon Go before it came out. Now, when Pokemon Go came out, because we had written so much about that game, our site was like the place to go for Pokemon Go news. Google, we were the #1 search result for Pokemon Go outside of Pokemon Go's website for like a year and a half. And so we did stupid amounts of traffic, and I was writing so much Pokemon, and I got burned out on writing about Pokemon during that time period, because I would literally wake up at 5 a.m. I would write as much Pokemon news content, Pokemon Go news content, and this was stupid stuff too, like how to get Pokeballs in Pokemon Go. You play the game. That's how you get the Pokeball. That's how you get the Pokeballs. How do you catch like this common Pokemon? You go outside. That's how you do this. And so I was getting burned out on writing that sort of content, because that was when Google made sense. And so I was like, hey, I've been playing D&D on the side. I just learned how to play. Can I start writing about that, please? And my editor was like, yeah, sure, why, go ahead. You have a little bit of D&D as a treat. And the very first D&D article I wrote was the top article for like a month and a half on the site. And it was like Old Spice had released a 5e class, and I wrote about that. And for whatever reason,
when was that? What year was that?
That was 2018. And
oh my gosh! Okay.
And like 2 weeks later, Wizards of the Coast contacted me, and Wizards was like, hey, we'd like to put you on the review list, and also would you like to fly out to LA to do this thing called the Stream of Many Eyes, because we think you'd like that. And so like I showed up, they handed me a copy of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and here's the thing, I was a Pathfinder player at the time. I was not playing 5e. I don't even think I owned a player's handbook. So I got hooked up with D&D Beyond at this thing. They started handing me rule books, and from there it was off to the freaking races. Now, I had known what Dungeons and Dragons was before that. But like I was playing Pathfinder, was into other tabletop RPGs, but for whatever reason, my horse became fixed to the D&D carriage, and fast forward to today, and I'm still writing about it.
That's amazing. Now, did you start off with D&D, or did you start off with Pathfinder?
No, Pathfinder. I ran the first half of Rise of the Rune Lords for my wife and like our best friends for years. And it collapsed because we moved out of the apartment in which 75% of the players lived in. We had like a 4-unit apartment building, and 3 of the units were filled with our Pathfinder players. Actually, I think at one point every single unit was filled with the players.
That's hilarious.
It was really close. There was like one unit where I think, we moved out, and my friend, who was a player, moved into that unit. So we moved out and moved a whopping 1.5 miles away. And basically, after that, our kids started to get older, and there 2 of the players broke up, and that ended the Pathfinder game. But by that point, I was also running a D&D campaign, because I'm like, if I'm going to write about this as much as I am, I probably need to like understand this game. And so I've been running D&D weekly, at least once a week. A lot of times, like during the pandemic, I was running it 3-4 times a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I've been playing D&D ever since. So I've gotten my time in recently.
Absolutely. I gotta wonder what it's like entering the TTRPG space from Pathfinder as opposed to D&D or even something else. I bet that was like, because I've always heard D&D players move to Pathfinder, right? Like that's a logical progression. So yeah, what was that like?
Well, like running the games isn't, they're not that dissimilar. I think that because Pathfinder is a little bit crunchier, there's less things that you can account for. What's really difficult is when you have like really engaged players, not hard to run Pathfinder. I've run Pathfinder 1, I've run Pathfinder 2nd edition. And when you have players who like really want to understand the rules, the game runs great. It's when you get the more casual players, the people who don't really, they just want to drive the car. They don't want to understand how the car runs. And I think that's really like the biggest difference between like 5th edition and a game like Pathfinder that's crunchier. With 5th edition, you pick your class, you pick your species now, and you pick your subclass at level 3. And now in the 2024 rules, there's a few more decision points when you make certain levels, but other than those, and like 2014 5th edition, really the only choices that you have are what magic spells you're going to choose, when you level up, or sometimes you can swap them out a little bit more freely if you're a wizard, and like what weapon are you going to pick?
Right.
Which is usually like I'm picking a longsword, or I'm picking an axe, great axe, or whatever.
Right.
So those are really usually your only choices. So once you make the decisions, the car drives itself from that point.
Yeah,
or
that's fair.
You're
That's fair.
driving the car, but you don't have to customize it. I would say that Pathfinder's more akin to maybe like a vintage car or something like that. You need to understand how it works because you want to make it, you want to keep it running.
You want to tune it up.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Nice. So how long were you at Comic Book for?
So I wrote for Comic Book for 9 years. So it would have been about 9.5 years. So
Nice.
I left in August, and it was basically what happened is Comic Book got purchased by CBS we were actually part of 24/7 Sports. Comic Book was owned by 24/7 Sports, and that organization got purchased for 24/7 Sports by CBS. So weirdly, Comic Book was part of CBS Sports, not like CBS like News, but CBS Sports. There was talk that we were going to get switched over to CBS News, and then the CBS News unionized like this year.
Oh, wow.
And when that happened, we were a lame duck because Paramount, CBS's parent company, was looking to offload all sorts of stuff. A venture capitalist firm called Savage Ventures went and purchased us in July 2024. They said they were going to retain all the staff, and then they promptly started to fire staff. I was a freelancer, and so eventually they didn't even like look at my content. They didn't care. They were just looking to slash budgets. They got rid of all the freelancers, and so I was let go. And the way that they did so was pretty terrible, if I do say so myself.
I remember when that purchase happened, and I remember because I think I just met you like a couple of months before at GaryCon, and I remember thinking to myself, "Oh man, that's next thing I'm going to hear is about layoffs." And they didn't even announce them. You were just suddenly talking about how you were looking for new work.
Yeah, well, that was because they it took them a month and a half to pay my final like invoice, and so I was trying to be nice because they owed me $1,600. And I didn't want to like lose that like income. And I was really optimistic. So the other thing that I did for Comic Book was I was like pretty decently involved with their their media side. A couple of years ago, I got approached by the Comic Book editorial team, and I got asked if I wanted to start a YouTube channel. And that turned into a thing called the Character Sheet. And it was, literally me and a producer. We had no other support. We ran it ourselves. And we built it up, just the two of us, to 44,000 subscribers. And Savage Ventures pointed to that, because we generated more revenue for comic book, that the character sheet did, than comic books, main YouTube page, which has like 1.2 million subscribers, most of which assuming were like purchased subscribers, but it had, it has a lot of subscribers, and the character sheet was generating a lot, more revenue, like a bit more. And we were like, that was like the golden child. And so there was like hope, probably misplaced hope, that, I would get kept on to at least run the character sheet. They didn't care. They never responded. I reached out about potentially purchasing the character sheet from them because, I put a lot of work and energy into that. And nothing, absolutely nothing. They never reached back to me or anything like that. And, the scuttlebutt I hear, because they've cut back a lot of they got rid of all their podcasts, save for one. And, their YouTube content is mostly just regurgitated interviews and stuff like that, like the interview contents for remote pressers they do, because they don't do a lot of in-person stuff anymore. They cut all their travel and previews and all that stuff out. It was very, very bizarre.
Weird.
Money generated. They don't want anyone to spend money. That's basically what it comes down to.
Good grief.
But yeah, so there was some hope that I was going to be able to keep the character sheet, but not to be. And it's a shame because the character sheet is still operating without.
I just saw an episode get posted like today or yesterday or something.
Yeah. And they try to do the same thing. I had a Pokemon podcast that ran for 275 episodes, and I literally was there one week and was not the next. Apparently the two remaining hosts made a decision to try to keep it going, and then it got canned 3 episodes later. And everyone was like, what the heck? Where's Christian at? And this isn't the same, because I was the expert voice in that subject. And
you were the resident Pokemon historian.
Yeah. I was the pokey journalist.
Well, oh gosh, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, we've heard a lot of stories like that. Like in the last couple of years, both across the enthusiast media sphere. A lot of that's been happening on the video game side, and it's just it's horrible.
It's really a shame because comic book had pretty consistent coverage for tabletop, and all that went away. Dicebreaker obviously got that went under. Polygon, even Polygon, they still have their people, but I heard their freelance budget's been slashed pretty hard, and like they are like the place to go to for tabletop stuff right now. So it's rough. Tabletop coverage in general is rough everywhere, and it's weird because Dungeons and Dragons consistently is a very strong driver of traffic across the board. So it's very, very, very odd, like juxtaposition.
Yeah. It's strange. I guess you could almost compare it to like how popular comic book movies are, but how comic books just aren't really that popular anymore, which to me sounds very strange too, but and sad. As a big comic guy growing up, it's sad to see. But enough of all that. Like you've actually bounced back pretty good. You've been doing a lot of work. Like you have not been resting on your laurels, so to speak. Tell us a bit about what you've got going on right now.
So my work can be found in a few places. So pretty quickly, like my D&D and tabletop RPG coverage got picked up pretty quickly by N-World. So I'm still writing news I'm still doing the thing that I do best, which is write news. And I'm doing that for N-World now. And it makes sense. N-World is one of the like places that people have gone for the last 20-25 years to hear about D&D news. It's like one of the last forums left on the internet. It's a good fit. Like, Russ really believes in like news coverage and, wanting to maintain an editorial presence. They've kind of pivoted in general to, they publish their own system. Like they have that level up system that they publish. And that does that does really well for them. So I write news for them. I've been freelancing a lot. I just started freelancing for Screen Rant, mostly Pokemon coverage, although weirdly they accepted one of my Warhammer pitches the other day. So look forward to that in the nearish future.
Nice.
Polygon has taken some of my work, and Games Radar is the other one. Games Radar, actually, you can find a decent amount of non-D&D tabletop coverage is over at Games Radar, because they have a little bit of a tabletop coverage, and a lot of their stuff is like Warhammer because they're a UK site,
Right.
but they do other stuff too, and so like Magic, a lot of the big stuff you can find that over, and they occasionally one of their US editor was my old editor at Comic Book, and he switched over there. And so when I got laid off, he's been trying to get me to write for them for a long time.
Yeah, we're real familiar with Games Radar. We actually had one of our former lead editors join them a few years back. I don't think he's there anymore. But I mean, just in general, I kind of felt like the kind of coverage that we do on Gaming Trend is similar. Just in terms of video games. I've been trying to like push up our tabletop coverage even more, or to kind of, I think the way I've been describing it is a like first level citizen status with the D&D stuff, right? With the video game stuff, but yeah. And then you also recently had a Dungeon Master's Guide review on Rascal, did you not?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've written a couple of things for Rascal. I totally forgot about that, because Rascal, so Lynn, Rowan, and Chase, they're professional colleagues. I've always gotten along with all three of them, and I really believe in what Rascal is doing, and and it was really funny with the DMG, specifically the review for that. I pitched that to 6 different sites, and
Wild.
Rascal was the only one who wanted to pay me for it. They pay a good rate. Like I said, I like their work. I really like Rascal a lot. I think that, especially with how Google is, Googling right now, I think that sites like Rascal, and like Gaming Trend too, because Gaming Trend is also like independent, not necessarily as reliant on Google traffic to make money and to like survive. So yeah, I write for Rascal when I can pitch. I have time to pitch them, and like I said, they cover D&D. So my stance on journalism is the facts are the facts. They speak for themselves. I don't really have strong editorial opinions about things. Like I do. Like I have strong opinions about everything. I just don't let that try to bleed into my coverage. Rascal obviously, is a very much let's show some passion in our takes, and
Right.
Usually their takes are the right ones. So it's been kind of interesting, like leaning into that space, because it's just not how I was trained. It's just not what I've done through my career. But it's not bad by any stretch of imagination. Like I said, I'm a big believer in their work, and I really hope they're successful.
Yeah, I've had a lot of discussion with Rowan in the last few weeks about tabletop media ethics.
Yeah.
I don't want to derail our conversation, but that's something that I've been working on. It's a passion of mine. I'm actually co-chair of a Gamma committee with Drew Worley of Whirligig Games. We're about to do some stuff in that space. But yeah, I've definitely come to appreciate Rascal. I've been watching what they've been doing closely, because yeah, we need more tabletop coverage out there, and
we do, and I think that the more voices that we have is always better. One of the things that I really like about Rascal is they each have their own takes on things. They all have different areas that they're good at. Lynn's right now is off in LA doing work for Interview with the Vampire. So they've brought on like 2 new writers who I'm not as familiar with their work. I think one of them used to work for Dicebreaker.
I think so.
But I think that in general, Rascal, I think that their approach to editorial content is probably like the right one. I think they understand that there's a space for like news and press releases and stuff like that, but that their writers probably should not like focus on that, especially when you have a small team like that.
Right.
And also, like, I'm really curious about like the subscription model. I think any journalist is at this point.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's how journalism got started back in the day, was, you paid for your news. And then we pivoted to free because there was ad revenue, and then Google took that ad revenue away from us, and now we're all screwed. The cycle is seeming to go back to subscriptions again. So we'll see how it works out.
No, it's it's been interesting watching. Now, you also launched a YouTube channel.
Right? This week, last week. So we officially hit our 7-day mark. I decided to pivot back to video again. I really like doing the video content. It really opened up like a lot of really interesting opportunities that just traditional online media didn't get. So I launched a new YouTube channel called Above the Table. The character sheet, over the course of its 2 years, it's found that the YouTube algorithm really pulled viewers just towards Critical Role coverage. So all of our other stuff, it did okay, but the real money makers were Critical Role videos. And so there was a push to produce, to monetize, and so to do as many Critical Role videos as you possibly could in a week. And like, I love Critical Role. It's how I got into Dungeons and Dragons in the first place. The entire reason I do this is because I started listening to Critical Role. Me and my wife did, and my wife decided that she wanted to learn how to play tabletop RPGs, and told me, learn how to play the tabletop RPGs and then teach me to play the tabletop RPGs.
Isn't that something that everybody wants their significant other to say to them, right?
Yeah. Well, my wife is, I think there's only one campaign that she has not played in. Every other campaign she's been a part of.
Fantastic.
So, so we launched Above the Table, myself and Hannah Adkins, who was another person who used to write for Comic Book, who got laid off. And actually, Hannah now she moved in with me and my wife and my family. Around the time that Comic Book came, let us both go. So she's staying with us, and she's going to be here for the foreseeable future. We have no plans on letting her leave anytime soon. And so she was just starting to do character sheet stuff. Like, I think she appeared in like maybe 2 videos, and then it all went to hell. And so I was like, you're super charismatic. You love doing these interviews. Let's start this over again. I'll do the editorial, the videos in which I ramble for 4 or 5 minutes talking about a subject, and we'll have you be kind of like the face of do more of the interview stuff. So we already did an interview with Richard Garfield. We're trying to set up a couple of other ones here in the coming weeks and months. And, I really want to try to push her to do those interviews, because I'll be honest, she's a better interviewer than I am. I'm very much like a conversationalist, but here's the thing. Like, I have a stutter. I'm half deaf. I can't say half the words of Dungeons and Dragons right. Not to mention like English language words. Those are all a struggle for me. So I would rather have somebody who's a bit more polished. She really takes time to like understand the subjects. Like, nice. I mean, I do prep for interviews. I prep for interviews, but she takes it to another level. So she's just much better at it than I am, and it's really stupid that that she's a pretty up and coming talent, and somehow she's doing a YouTube channel with me. I'll take it. Not going to complain one bit. But so we launched that this week. We already have about 500 subscribers. We should probably be there in the next day or two. We have some good content coming up. I'm interviewing Chris Perkins for both N World, and the video version of that is going to end up on Above the Table. And we've got so we have that, and like I said, we're trying to line up some more interviews in the coming weeks, and I'm sure they'll start coming in. And like I said, picking up 500 subscribers in a week is pretty good. We tried that, and the videos that we've posted, they're performing well for a site that size. So we're pretty happy with the early return on it.
That's great, man. Like I said, it's been great seeing you bounce back from a difficult situation. I feel like I've been seeing more of your work out there than I did before you got laid off, and that's awesome. But I imagine you've been a very busy man.
Yeah, well, I also have a day job, so that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and it's not a low maintenance day job either. I'm a banking executive by day, so I stay busy. I actually have more time now because I don't have to concern myself. Like, I still have to pitch to different sites for a lot of coverage. Right. But like for N World, it's like, okay, whatever's the D&D news of the day, I'll write about it. Mm-hmm. Then maybe I'm going to record a video about it. But if I don't want to pitch that day, I'm done. Like today I wrote a Magic the Gathering list for Screen Rant, and I think I wrote one news article for them, and I wrote one news article for N World. But that was it. That was my day in terms of my writing. Where before I'd be writing 5-6 articles especially on Mondays, because that's one of my free nights. And so now it's like, it's 7:30, and the only thing I have left to do is record a podcast in which I'm the subject. What the heck?
Well, you know what? That seems like as good a time as any to kind of bring up some, maybe take a little of that off of you, and okay. Let's have a chat. Let's have a chat about the state of D&D discourse online today.
Okay, yeah.
Wouldn't you rather have an argument about it?
I mean, I'm sure YouTube and Google would rather I have an argument about it. Yeah. So this is something I've been wanting to find someone to talk about, because it's. I mean, obviously the OGL thing that happened last year, and if you're watching this and you don't know what happened, basically Wizards of the Coast, and Hasbro technically did a really stupid thing and shot themselves in the foot by trying to change the OGL license, which allowed a lot of people outside of Wizards of the Coast, a lot of companies outside of Wizards of the Coast, create content for 5th edition.
Yeah, it's open gaming license.
Yeah, actually, Steven, why don't you go into depth with a little bit of that? Our D&D historian.
I don't really want to, but the OGL
just a little bit, just to set the tone, set the context.
So when the Wizards came out with the OGL, the Open Gaming License, during 3rd edition, or was it 3.5? I think it was 3.5. But the idea was to enable people that didn't work for them to produce stuff using the basic rule set. So the Open Gaming License was written and developed to make it easier for people to use Dungeons and Dragons rules, a certain small amount of them, in order to produce their own products and sell those products without having to go through the entire licensing effort with the main company. And other organizations and other companies have actually used that model to do their own thing. I don't know if D&D was the first, but it was the first big one that I heard
right.
of. Mm-hmm. They may have been pioneering in that space. And it is pretty useful.
Created an entire cottage industry. I mean,
yeah, exactly. And they tweaked it a little bit with 4th edition, and then but they didn't mess with it going into 5th edition. But it is the Open Gaming License that gave rise to Pathfinder. I mean, Pathfinder was a child of the Open Gaming License, And when they went from 3.5 to 4th edition, Pathfinder was able to capitalize on that and corner that D20 market, which is something that, I mean, the Pathfinder rule set really was a version of 3.5, really.
Yeah.
And it maintains that 3.5 pedigree. So now we find ourselves in last year where the open gaming license was being relied on by a great many people to produce tons of Dungeons and Dragons content, Dungeons and Dragons adjacent and Dungeons and Dragons related content, including non-D&D type stuff where you use the basic D&D rule set, but you can fly in space, or you can go hunt for Cthulhu monsters or various things like that. So there's a lot of games and gaming products that were using the OGL. Then Wizards decided, well, or has under Hasbro's guidance, direction, or urging, they changed that OGL license. And I think that's a whole rat's nest of why they did that. But ultimately, I think that generally it's acknowledged that it comes down to profits and where we're going to make money for our company that other people are making outside of our company by using our product. So is that a good summary?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, what precipitated a lot of this was the then pending 2024 like rules revamps. They had just bought D&D Beyond from who owned it before? It was like
It was like Curse or something like that.
Yeah,
Curse.
And they were really starting to kind of telegraph this, basically a new D&D that they had a lot more control over, right? And and the best way I can describe it is that they totally overplayed their hand, and all hell broke loose. So before
and by
the one thing
all breaking loose, can I?
Go ahead.
So what you saw was a huge backlash in the fan community, the user community is where you saw a huge backlash. A lot of people create a lot of stuff, and it's a lot. I don't know how to. There's no way really to describe it. You just have to take a look at the different markets where you can get stuff. It was a lot, and a lot of those little corner creators all over the web just reacted negatively, extremely.
Right. So and basically, like, there was a lot of back and forth, and then suddenly they came out with a new revision, and they put a lot of stuff in, like making it part of a Creative Commons license, and like my impression of their reaction is they didn't do like a full 180, but they did a lot more than anybody expected them to. I don't know. What was your take on that, Christian?
Well, so kind of like the background from what I've been told by various people at Wizards or close to people at Wizards is that, the D&D design team, which are really the stewards of Dungeons and Dragons, those folks were almost to a T, like, against messing with the OGL because they knew what was going to happen. I mean, It's not rocket science. You try to undercut a lot of people's livelihoods. And there are lots of people who make their living making Dungeons and Dragons, products that aren't official Wizards of the Coast. Most of the folks who work at Dungeons and Dragons got their start making products via the OGL. Jeremy Crawford, he designed outside of Dungeons and Dragons for years, doing OGL material. I don't think Chris Perkins ever did, because I think, Chris Perkins, I'm sure, did early work using the OGL, and most of the rank and file designers all did too. The problem was, from what I've been told, there were a couple of people who have never been a fan of the OGL, and they caught the ear of bean counters and stuff like that, and really started to push that and make that happen. And I'm not going to name names because I don't know those names specifically, but
Right.
I've been told to a T. And some of it was, people the corporate suits were looking for more ways to maximize the profitability of Dungeons and Dragons. They had just made a significant investment in D&D Beyond, and really, and you're starting to see that now. What
Right.
they want to do is not only make D&D Beyond like the exclusive or one of the exclusive homes of online D&D content. They also want it to be a marketplace for third-party D&D content. And one of the ways that they tried to basically force people to go along with that plan was with the revisions they were going to make to the OGL. And again, that has nothing to do with one D&D or anything like that, but it did have everything to do with kind of this entire positioning of the plan for D&D. And again, this is just what I've been told. I've never officially reported this because I've never gotten a lot of the stuff on the record. This is just kind of like rumors and scuttlebutt. But I've heard that a lot, so you can kind of take that what take that as you will. And so I think it was just a matter of corporate a big corporation and C-suite not listening to the people who actually know how the products work and function. And you see that so often in every single industry, not just the games industry.
Right.
You see that in literally every industry. Like the suits try to dictate how the products should be made and what is actually best for the company without ever actually understanding the nature of the business. I mean, literally, I was a victim of that with comic book, and how I left comic book was, the corporate suits did not understand the business that they had just purchased and, cut away large swaths of it because they cared more about, increasing
bottom line.
Yeah, bottom line and profitability without understanding the nature of the business. And that's literally, I think that's the easiest way of describing the OGL was that happened, and they underestimated the response. And the big chunk of the response is it wasn't just like the content creators, it wasn't just the cottage industry. The thing that I think it's underspoken, that we don't talk about a lot with this OGL thing is around the same time as the OGL stuff, there have been a lot of online content creators. I'm not talking about people who make D&D products. I'm talking about people who make online videos for D&D and stuff like that. A lot of them were starting to pivot into how do I monetize my YouTube channel beyond the $25,000 I make a year? Oh, I'm going to run a Kickstarter and I'm going to sell my D&D book. And, those have been super profitable in the last couple of years.
Yes.
They're the dungeon dudes, have raised millions of dollars, making 5e material. And a lot of other, we've seen a lot of people like MCDM, Matt Colville, he made millions off of Kickstarter doing that sort of stuff. And a lot of people have seen that as the actual viable business model. It's not just, I don't go onto DM's Guild and sell my stuff and get to keep 50% of the profit. I need to go and sell myself as the product and then take my ideas and use, once I have become established, I can then sell my product a lot more easily.
Right. And so I kind of try to steer it back to what I want to talk about. The backlash by content creators, especially against the OGL change and the things that were leaked out, was rightfully harsh.
Yeah.
Right. It was deservedly harsh. The thing that concerns me is that, and I suspect that it's that D&D team, the real stewards, like you were saying, that have managed to point to this to their corporate overlords and say, we need to fix this or this is going to get worse. and managed to talk them into fixing it in actually a pretty surprisingly good way.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the discourse around D&D since then has remained very negative.
Or pessimistic, at least,
Yeah.
I think.
I would actually go so far as to say there a whole entire segment of content creators just doubled and tripled down on saying bad things about D&D because their videos were getting lots of hits and they were making lots of money off of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's like, first of all, I believe in if someone changes, especially a company where like the public outcry was so strong that it forced a company to change the direction that they were going in, like I feel like that should be acknowledged. Like we got some wins there, right?
Yeah.
And I'd rather encourage that company to keep on doing good things and not think, oh, well, we did something, you know, they said that we would fix it if we did this, but then everybody's still hating on us.
So I think a couple of things happened that came out of the OGL as how people approach Dungeons and Dragons. So, you know, prior to the OGL, like around the time that I got into Dungeons and Dragons, the folks at D&D, you know, buoyed by the success of 5th edition, they realized they had a hit on their hands, and they tried to build up the community in a really organic way. And you saw that with how D&D approached their Twitch content, for instance. You know, they used to have a Twitch channel that ran actual plays. They would sponsor actual play shows and podcasts and things like that. Not just like the dice camera action that Chris Perkins used to run, but they would run other shows where they would find organic content creators and say, hey, we're going to pay you to run a channel or run a show, actual play on our show. Warriors of Waterdeep was one of those, or Rivals of Waterdeep, excuse me. Warriors
That's
of
right.
Waterdeep was a mobile game. And so for a brief shining moment, there was a real sense of community surrounding Dungeons and Dragons. Critical Role used to be a part of that, because before Critical Role had really exploded into like the multimedia empire that it is today, they were just a bunch of dorky people who wanted to play D&D that just happened to be voice actors in all the animes that you loved. Yep. You had like celebrities coming out of the woodwork a little bit.
You had Jerry Holkins, Mike Krahulik. I mean, wasn't Acquisitions Incorporated like one of the first actual plays?
It was one of the first actual plays, and it was the first sponsored actual play. That was started as a way to promote 4th edition on Penny Arcade. That is the reason why it got started. It got started as a way to promote the newly released 4th edition for Penny Arcade. I don't know what they were doing quite then. Another early one was like Harmon Quest was another really early actual play.
I remember that. And that came out of his podcast.
Yeah. And so there was, like I said, so there was a real sense of like goodwill and community, that all of that effort that Wizards of the Coast fostered, by investing time, money, and a platform into creators. And then the pandemic happened, and there were a few pivots away from that. Like, so a good example is, when the pandemic happened for D&D Live 2020, instead of inviting, the same actual play people that, usually appear and stuff like that, there were all these celebrities staying at home. And so Wizards of the Coast invested a lot of time and money in basically paying celebrities to play D&D on the all digital D&D Live. Now, some of those people were real fans. Like I'm like Athena, the wrestler Athena. She's like a hardcore D&D fan. I'm friends with her, and she's and she was thrilled to do that, and she loved it, and there's still that level of enthusiasm there. But the big thing that was missing from that D&D Live 2020 stuff was, the community aspect of it was almost non-existent. And then in 2021, there was no community involvement whatsoever. And so D&D had slowly started to separate itself from this like goodwill that, you know, it had really fostered. And so
Right.
when they did the OGL stuff, you know, there were no voices in the community to remind people like, hey, we are a community that's built around this one brand, because they had abandoned it years ago. They had abandoned that community. And so like it was super negative because, you know, D&D wasn't investing that time and that energy and that focus into
Right.
the, you know, had they invested that time and energy and focus, I don't think that the OGL would have gone down, would have been well received, but there would have been people who would have been like, well, let's hold on, you know, but there wasn't any of that because, you know, they had no support because there was nobody who thought that this wasn't just a cold corporate decision. And, you know,
Right.
that's what it was. It was a cold corporate decision.
Absolutely.
But, you know, you're always
Absolutely.
going to, you know, you're always going to have people who, you know, like say like, hey, that's a touch too far, or, hey, maybe we should moderate. But, you know, they are just starting to kind of sort of invest more resources into the community. One of the things that you really saw out of the OGL stuff was there was a realization that the Dungeons and Dragons franchise and the Dungeons and Dragons team had really been separated from the people who play Dungeons and Dragons since the pandemic. And so you saw as almost like an apology tour, which Gary Con, which you and I met at, Mike, that was a part of.
Absolutely.
You know, Wizards of the Coast had a presence at Gary Con, this small convention run by Gary Gygax's kid. And, you know, they invited a bunch of press there and had a full contingent of their team there as well. To kind of, and I don't want to say this was the reason for it, but it certainly didn't hurt, was to kind of regain some of that trust and rebuild some of that connection to its community. And you see that with with Gen Con. They had a big presence at Gen Con 2. They had a big presence at Gamehole Con. They're going to have a big presence at PAX Unplugged. They're now trying to go back out to the people and try to reforge a connection that they've lost and goodwill that they've burned.
So I would actually go further and say that they started doing that last year, because D&D hadn't been at Gen Con in years.
Yep.
And Jeremy Crawford and Greg Tito and a few other folks were at Gen Con last year.
Yeah.
So this would have been right after, like just a few months after the OGL debacle. And they were, you know, ostensibly trying to hype up like the Planescape release, the stuff that they had towards the end of the year and toward the beginning of this year. But they were like, they were more hands-on than they'd been in years. And it just then.
Well,
And,
you know, it's funny because with that, I was getting, so I interviewed Jeremy Crawford at Gen Con last year. And
as did I.
The big thing that happened was there was the AI stuff that came out involving Vigors.
That's right.
And it was really funny because like that went down in real time at Gen Con. And so like the statement that was given out, I was literally in the room when Greg Tito like said that statement aloud for the first time.
Wild.
Because, you know, like that's how fresh it was, because I had to tell them like, hey, you're about to put me in the room with one of the two main faces of Dungeons and Dragons. If you do not give me an answer for this AI stuff, the very first question I'm going to ask is, what is Dungeons and Dragons stance on AI? And if it is the stance that because they had recently came out right before that and said, hey, we don't support this AI stuff.
Right.
I'm going to say, what do you have in place to prevent this from happening? Hey, is this AI in this brand new book that you gave me? You know, what is going on here? And so, you know, there was a need to address that because, you know, otherwise, you know, to be blunt, I was going to ask some very uncomfortable questions. And, you know, they copped to it. You know, that was the thing. And, you know, they were just as shocked by that as anybody, you know, and to be clear, the D&D design team, almost every single person I've talked to on the D&D design team, both on the record and off the record, they all hate AI. They don't see any
Yeah.
use for it. They don't want it. They don't want it in the game. They don't want anything. Even like the whole like, oh, AI DMs and stuff like that. They're just like,
Yeah.
that's silly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they're not supporters of it. And like, I mean, obviously their boss's boss, Chris Cox that's the CEO of Hasbro.
Right.
But, you know, they didn't want that AI art in their books too. They just missed it because they didn't know what AI art looked like 18 months prior when that art got turned in, because AI art wasn't a thing back then.
Right.
And so, you know,
exactly.
That entire thing was really interesting. But, you know, the AI art, you know, that touches on like kind of like the damaging part of like what discourse is like in the D&D stuff.
Right.
You know, because there's so many AI witch hunts now, and they're targeting artists, and it's stupid. And like there's definitely a need to be critical of art,
certainly,
period. And there is a need to be vigilant about AI art. But for the love of God, like, don't just casually make accusations unless you have viable proof, and your viable proof better not be, well, I'm really bad at, art criticism. And so I'm going to say some things about art, about this piece of artwork, that I am just literally talking out of my ass. Because we've seen that like 3 or 4 times. And every single time I contact the artist and I'm like, hey, here are some statements that's being made about your work. Do you have a comment on this? Did you use AI art? Do you have any work in progress pieces to show that this wasn't AI art? And every single time my inbox gets flooded with 12 to 15 work in progress pieces. Because here's the thing, a lot of these are digital artwork. And you know, my personal stance on digital art, and this is, you know, I too come from the land of comic books. I like my comics art and I like my fantasy art hand drawn and hand painted. You know, I'm analog all the way. But we missed the chance to have that conversation. Photoshop, that is an accepted tool belt or a tool that exists in every single artist's toolbox, and we lost our chance to kick that shit out decades ago. We missed out. Like there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. And if you can't recognize the difference between Photoshop, what's just a straight Photoshop brush, and generative AI, like, one, like, pay attention. And like it to be fair, because Adobe's dabbling in AI shit too. It can be hard. Like I empathize to some degree, but you have to understand the difference if you're going to make accusations like that, because you can literally ruin somebody's career.
Yeah, and I mean it's not like they're tracing old pictures from old Playboy magazines, like Greg Land, for instance. And that's the thing too. Like, the thing that has always struck me is that everybody on that D&D team, the love for what they're doing, and the respect for what they're doing, really, really just kind of radiates out from them. Like, you know, talking to Jeremy, talking to Chris, you know, talking to Greg when he was there, everybody, Armin, everybody on that team, like, they are the right people that we want there. And I feel like I'm worried that, and I feel like we've already lost one of them, Greg, that they're gonna just get exhausted from the onslaught of negativity, and, like, you know, basically they are crushed between the corporate interests and the negativity online. Like, I can't even imagine what it's been like for them, and then trying to launch a whole new line of books in the middle of that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not an enviable situation. I mean, there's two sides that I have to this, and one is I really hope that Hasbro provides them with the resources that they need to kind of like filter the noise out. You know, I think that they do good work. I also think, and I'll just be blunt about this, you know, I think just about everybody who works there understands the state of the online space now. And I think that a lot of them have already taken steps to limit their exposure to it. Like, you don't see nearly as much people active, you know, on Twitter or, any form of social media. Now some of that I can say is corporate driven, like only official, like, you know, you're never going to see like members of the D&D design team really comment about D&D design anymore in like a space like Reddit, for example. Like that's a no-no, and that's a big no-no. Even when there's like misinformation out there, you know, only the official people who are allowed to go on those spaces, and they have really good people who are media trained and probably are the right people to comment about that. But, you know, like, you're not going to see that sort of back and forth engagement, which you used to be able to see all the time. And, you know, I think that's a kind of an interesting thing.
And
really
and then Greg Tito leaving,
yeah,
just a few,
no,
I guess,
Greg,
like a month ago, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
didn't was it you that got the quote from him? Like, I know someone asked him about something, and he basically just ripped into
He
corporate.
made a couple of comments. He's made a couple of comments. He was very burned out on, you know, I think firsthand, and this is kind of like the understated thing, the OGL thing and a few other weirdo decisions that have been made regarding the Dungeons & Dragons brand have been made because the people in the room who understand were not being listened to, or they weren't in the room at all. And, you know, I think Tito saw that firsthand. He's even commented about it. And, you know, where making the right decision was overlooked, you know, out of a desire to make more money. And, you know, I think he's seen that firsthand. Now, I will say, to counter that a little bit, and, you know, Greg, you know, I think he's certainly done his time at Wizards of the Coast, and he left what he called a dream job because he couldn't do it anymore. And he straight up has said that publicly. You know, I do think that some of the right people are being put in the right positions. You know, Jess Lanzillo is just absolutely fantastic. She's the new like head of franchise. She is somebody who like understands. She's a gamer. She is a freaking gamer. You know, she's an artist. Like, you know, so she's an artistic person and a gamer who understands D&D because she's been playing D&D since the 80s.
Yeah, that's right. She was on stage at the Gen Con thing, and you got an interview with her afterwards, right?
I did. I got to talk with her for about 20 minutes. And, you know, she is somebody who, you know, I really hope people listen to her. I think is the best thing, because, you know, here's the other thing. She has like bona fides on the business side too. She's I don't know if she's really done what Hasbro considers C-suite stuff, but I mean, she's worked on the business side of Magic, so
she knows how to navigate that space.
Yeah, she understands how to navigate that space, and you don't become the head of franchise of D&D if you're, you know, don't have some sort of business sense to you. Chris Perkins just got, you know, I don't know if it's a promotion or a new role as creative director. That happened about a month ago.
I saw that. I saw your reporting that the DMG was his last book that he was, and I was like, oh no, this is what I've been worried about.
Well, and I was told, really, so it took Wizards a couple days to get back to me, but they told me like he's not leaving the company, and he said that around the same time that he was taking that creative director role. Now, Wizards like played coy about it, so I'm assuming there's going to be a more official announcement. But, you know, he's creative director, and that basically means that he's going to be taking on. Mike Merles used to have that space. He was creative director back in the day, and so basically he's going to be in charge because, you know, Hasbro wants to make a push to make Dungeons and Dragons a multimedia franchise. You know, they have very aggressive plans for the video game space in that regard, and they want, you know, one of the things that Warhammer does the best is, you know, there's a lot of trash Warhammer games out there, but lore wise, every Warhammer game that gets made is very true to the lore. Like, you're not going to see any like happy-go-lucky Space Marines in any video game. You know, that franchise like lives, and like, you know, that's why there hasn't been any announcements on you know, the Amazon Warhammer stuff, because you know, they are very strict about tonal consistency. And I think that, there's not quite as much of that with Dungeons and Dragons, because Dungeons and Dragons is a game that's literally about making the stories the way you want to make stories. But if you're going to do something in the Forgotten Realms does have a particular energy and a particular vibe to it.
Right.
And I think that is something that needs, that Chris Perkins is going to try to bring consistency as we see that stuff.
So, well, Christian, we've definitely blown through our hour pretty quickly here in my my estimate. There was more I wanted to talk to you about, like, the state of the game of D&D today, which I know you have some thoughts on. Maybe we can have you back on after the DMG and the Monster Manual come out, and we can have a more comprehensive discussion about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that.
Excellent. So, well, thanks, Christian. Definitely go check out Christian's YouTube channel, Above the Table. Check out his work at InWorld, Rascal, Screen Rant, and maybe one of these days we'll have him write something for Gaming Trend too. I'd love to see that. And actually, Christian, real quick, are you going to be at PAX Unplugged this year?
I'm not. I'm unfortunately, my income got slightly disrupted here a couple months ago, and fair. So I'm kind of trying to scale back plans based on that. So, unless for some reason like Wizards of the Coast pays for me to go out, I probably won't do that this year.
Right on.
Listening, you know how to contact.
Awesome. Well, I hope I do get a chance to see you at some of the upcoming conventions. I'm definitely going to GaryCon again this year. That became like a thing that I can't miss. After this year was the first time I went. It was amazing. But thanks for coming on the show, Christian, and keep on doing the good work, man. Really appreciate what you're doing out there.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Until next week, this is Tabletop Throwdown. If you like what you saw, hit that subscribe, hit that follow, do all the stuff that everybody tells you to do that I always forget to tell everyone to do.
Do it if you didn't like.
Yeah, exactly.